So, the second one we're going to talk about is New Historicism. And this essentially takes a look at the author's life, their social context, their cultural context. Where are they in the history or culture that they are from, and how is that seen in their own writing? So, in this case, we think about the author's intention. What are they actually trying to prove within their own culture? That we want to judge a piece of literature in relation to its time period and culture, and that it's not fair to judge it by modern standards. So, for example, if a character is acting in a way that we today would find inappropriate in a new historicism, we have to consider the context that it's from. And that literary texts, because they are part of a culture in a time and space, that they represent the values of that culture's time and space. Um, so, something we want to think about is how are the characters or the language of the events reflect the current events of the author's day? Are there words in the text that have changed meaning from the time? So, considering that. How are the events interpretation a product of the culture or the time of the author? How does this piece portray or criticize the leading political figures and movements of the day? So, for example, I'm sure there is writings being made right now that are criticizing the political election. I'm sure there are people writing all sorts of dystopian literature about viruses taking over the earth, right? So, how does this piece of literature represent the time it's coming from? So, we all want to consider the beliefs, the values, the cultural values that are criticized or celebrated, defended by the literary work. So, I have a picture of J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter. So, Harry Potter was written in the 90s and 2000s, and it is a product of its time in which the predominant belief among a lot of, well, I'm going to be honest, white scholars was that we need to be colorblind rather than view racism or acknowledge racism. So we look at a lot of Harry Potter, and although there are characters of color, they are, so we have Cho Chang, we have the Patil sisters, we have Dean Thomas. There are a few characters of color, but I think it's interesting that there are none of note who are major characters. Cho Chang literally has just two last names instead of a first name, and none of them actually have any qualities that display who they are in a rich way. So they are simply names, but none of their character traits connect to any culture or identity that is representative of the cultures or identities that they are supposed to represent. So I think it is really interesting that we examine Harry Potter through a lens of it was written in the 90s when it was supposed to be a colorblind society where we are all the same, rather today where we would like to acknowledge the wide variety of cultures and showing many people being many different ways. And so Harry Potter is a product of the 90s and represents the values that were indicative of the time.